For 4 months, Seon Ryun believed the whispers that the beautiful, striking black woman he married had only bound herself to his dark world for the billions in his bank account. But the absolute second he watched her stand in a dim Gangnam alleyway, selling her priceless heirloom wedding ring to a shady underworld broker, his entire reality shattered. She wasn't escaping his empire with his wealth. She was using the cash to buy back his lieutenant's compromised loyalty and shield their unborn child from a lethal coup. The cold, midnight rain slashes against the brutalist concrete walls of the estate, but Seon Ryun doesn't feel the chill. His hands are trembling, slick with water and a terrifyingly familiar, unnatural sweat as he lifts Adi's limp, unconscious body from the freezing cobblestones of the driveway. Her gorgeous, deep mahogany skin is deathly pale, her long, soaked black waves matted against the fabric of her elegant crimson dress. For months, his syndicate inner circle warned him that she was nothing but an opportunistic outsider, a golden-skinned distraction who married him for nothing but status and wealth. Yet here she is, collapsed at the iron gates of his fortress, gasping for breath while the dark, spiderwebbing black veins of nightshade poison creep silently up her neck. He carries her past the security detail, kicking open the doors to his private, high-tech medical wing, a stark, clinical space of brushed steel and blue LED lighting that he usually keeps entirely isolated from her. He expects to find an escape plan or a hidden passport in her things while the disgraced syndicate medic frantically prepares an antitoxin. Instead, hidden behind a false panel in her vanity, his hand brushes against a worn, blood-stained diary detailing his own mother's secret history, alongside a mapped-out web of his syndicate's internal leaks. The physical conditioning of her posture as she begins to stir, the fierce, protective way her hands immediately guard her stomach, even while heavily sedated, shatters every single assumption he ever held. She is not a fragile, greedy lady playing a transactional game. She knew the monsters surrounding him before she ever said her vows, and she chose to walk directly into the line of fire. The dose of nightshade coursing through her blood wasn't meant to eliminate a gold digger. It was a calculated strike designed to end her early-stage pregnancy and force a wedge between them. Adiz opens her eyes, weak but unyielding, confirming that his own trusted lieutenant is drowning in underworld debts and working with his toxic ex-fiancée, Chaiwon. Seon Ryun wants to burn the city down in a blind, protective Mafia rage, but Adiz's fierce maternal instinct cuts through the panic. She whispers that if he strikes now, he walks directly into a trap. To keep him blind enough to stay alive, she has to make the ultimate move. She has to step into the shadows and let him, and the entire underworld, fully believe she is abandoning him. Before we dive into the chilling moments, Seon Ryun follows her into the storm and watches her place her sacred ring on a velvet pawn tray. I want to welcome you to our late-night storytelling family. If you can feel the raw psychological tension and emotional friction between these two powerful souls, take a second to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Drop a comment below letting us know which city or country you're listening from tonight. Our community spans the globe, and we love seeing where our dark romance family gathers. Now, let's return to the rain-slicked streets of Seoul, where a Mafia king is about to watch his queen make a devastating sacrifice. The midnight downpour slashes against the brutalist concrete and glass exterior of the estate with a feral, unrelenting fury. Seoul is entirely swallowed by darkness, leaving only the piercing, cold white of high-voltage security halogens to reflect off the wet stone driveway. The air hanging over the courtyard is thick with the suffocating scent of wet asphalt, ozone, and the faint, metallic premonition of oncoming blood. Seon Ryun sits in the back of his armored sedan, his expression an unreadable mask of cold, calculated authority as the vehicle glides past the perimeter gates. He has just spent the last 7 hours dismantling a rogue faction of his own syndicate, his mind a razor-sharp grid of strategy and cold indifference. He is a man defined by a terrifying, hyper-controlled stillness, a king who rules the Chanjiang underbelly through absolute psychological dominance. But as the car pulls up to the main entrance, the sweeping headlights illuminate a shocking anomaly that shatters his perfect composure. A figure lies collapsed face down on the freezing cobblestones, completely defenseless against the driving rain. Seon Ryun kicks the door open before his security detail can even react, stepping directly into the freezing storm. He does not care that his bespoke tailored suit is instantly soaked, or that the icy water is plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He reaches the figure and rolls her over, his breath hitching sharply in his chest. It is Adiz, his elegant, fiercely independent wife. Her deep mahogany skin, usually radiant and warm, is slick with rain and an unnatural, icy sweat. Her long, voluminous black waves are matted to the wet stone, contrasting sharply with the deep crimson silk of her dress. Seon Ryun pushes the wet hair from her face, his large, calloused hand trembling against her soft, freezing cheek. As he strips back the collar of her dress, his heart drops into an abyss of pure fury. Branching out across her collarbone and racing up her neck are thin, spiderwebbing black veins. It is the unmistakable, catastrophic signature of Nightshade. It is a hyper-exclusive, synthetic neurotoxin used solely by top-tier Korean syndicates for covert, untraceable executions. It is a poison designed to kill slowly, mimicking a sudden, tragic illness. For the 4 months they have been married, his entire inner circle has whispered that Adiz was nothing but an opportunistic outsider, a beautiful gold digger who targeted the Chanjiang boss solely for his billions and his untouchable status. Seon Ryun had built a wall of ice between them, trying to keep his lethal world completely isolated from her pure, radiant presence, punishing himself for the dark desire he felt whenever she looked at him with those unyielding, brilliant eyes. But looking at her now, he realizes his silence didn't protect her. The venomous world he thought he kept at bay has breached his inner sanctum, and it is actively consuming the only woman who has ever managed to anchor his soul. He lifts her deadweight body against his chest, the soft, ruined silk of her dress clinging to his rigid, heavily tattooed frame. The contrast between her fragile, poisoned form and his lethal, muscular strength burns through him like liquid fire. His calculated composure is entirely gone, replaced by a raw, primal panic that scares him more than any war he has ever fought. He carries her through the grand doors of his fortress, his eyes locked on her pale face as she breathes in shallow, ragged gasps. His right-hand man, Baek Tae-sung, steps out from the shadows of the foyer, his eyes widening as he takes in the sight of the poisoned queen. Tae-sung reaches for his weapon, his voice dropping to a harsh, hurried whisper as he locks eyes with his boss. He tells Seon Ryun that if she has Nightshade in her system, she was targeted from inside the family. Someone within the inner circle wanted her eliminated tonight, and they engineered it to look like she was running away from the estate with her pockets lined. Seon Ryun ignores the warning, his grip tightening around Adiz as he marches down toward the hidden levels of the house, knowing that the real war has just begun inside his own walls. Deep beneath the main estate, the hidden medical wing is bathed in a dim, clinical blue light that casts long, distorted shadows across the brushed steel cabinets and leather surfaces. The only sound cutting through the suffocating silence is the rhythmic, hollow beep of the heart monitor tracking Adiz's frail, fighting pulse. The air is heavy with the sterile scent of chemical antiseptics, contrasting sharply with the rich, expensive leather of the chair where Seon Ryun sits, his eyes fixed on his wife's face. He is brought in an off-grid, disgraced syndicate medic, a man whose silence is bought with blood, to administer a highly restricted antitoxin. While Adiz fights the sedative, her long black lashes casting shadows over her mahogany cheekbones, Seon Ryun's mind spirals into a dark abyss of paranoia. The words of his lieutenant echo in his skull. They made it look like she was running away. Driven by a sudden, frantic need for answers, Seon Ryun leaves her bedside and storms into her private dressing room upstairs. He begins to tear through her things, fully expecting to find what his advisors always warned him about: offshore bank routing numbers, stolen syndicate bonds, or a hidden passport meant for a quick escape. He needs to find proof of her greed to justify the agonizing pain ripping through his chest. Instead, his hand brushes against a loose panel at the very back of her dark wood vanity. He pries it open, his fingers clamping around a worn, blood-stained leather diary. When he opens it, his breath catches. Tucked between the yellowed pages are old, faded photographs of his own mother, taken decades ago before she was hunted down and torn away from him. Seon Ryun's hands shake as his eyes skim the elegant, tight handwriting. The diary doesn't contain financial tallies or escape routes. It contains an exhaustive, deeply personal account of a historical debt. Adiz isn't a random, opportunistic outsider who stumbled into his life by chance. She is the daughter of a courageous woman who originally helped Seon Ryun's mother flee across the border from North Korea when he was just a child. Adiz knew exactly who Seon Ryun was long before she ever met him. She understood the tragic, bloody history of his family, and she was acutely aware of the literal monsters that surrounded his throne before she ever accepted his marriage proposal. She had entered his world with her eyes wide open, carrying her family's legacy of loyalty in absolute silence. Seon Ryun walks back down to the medical wing, the weight of the diary crushing the breath from his lungs. He sits beside her again, gently taking her cold, soft hand into his large, rough palm. The unvoiced guilt is a physical weight on his chest, suffocating him. He has spent the last 4 months treating her with a cold, distant suspicion, believing she was a parasite feeding on his wealth, while she was silently acting as a shield, walking through the shadows of his palace just to keep watch over the son of the woman her family had once died to protect. He studies her face, realizing that her immense mental strength and resilience weren't a shield against him, but a shield for him. He holds physical dominance over her comatose form, but she has completely stripped him of his narrative power. Every cold word he ever spoke to her flashes through his mind, cutting him deeper than any blade. Suddenly, the continuous beep of the heart monitor falters, spiking erratically. The disgraced medic jumps, typing frantically into the diagnostic screen as he checks the chemical breakdown of Adiz's blood. The doctor's face turns entirely pale under the blue LED lights, his hands trembling as he looks up to meet the fierce, lethal gaze of the Mafia boss. He tells Seon Ryun that the dose of nightshade wasn't altered to kill her quickly. It was a highly precise, slow-acting variation meant to mimic a natural failure of the body, designed specifically to end her early-stage pregnancy without raising suspicion. The air inside the master office is thick and suffocating, smelling of old paper, heavy mahogany, and the faint scent of rain drifting in from the partially open terrace. Outside, the low rumble of thunder vibrates through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, casting a restless amber glow over Seon Ryun's towering silhouette. Adiz sits in the large leather chair opposite his desk, her posture remarkably straight and unyielding despite the pale exhaustion lingering on her face. Her long waves are draped over her shoulders, her deep mahogany skin catching the dim light of the desk lamp. She does not look like a woman who just survived an assassination attempt. She looks like a queen preparing for war, her hands resting protectively over her lower stomach. Seon Ryun paces the length of the room, his movements jagged and filled with a dangerous, volatile energy. The revelation of her pregnancy has unhinged something deep within his psyche, a fierce, protective madness that he is struggling to contain. He stops directly in front of her, leaning down until his shadow completely engulfs her, his dark eyes burning with a mixture of profound shock and raw fury. He demands to know why she kept the child a secret, why she allowed him to believe her marriage was nothing but a transactional arrangement for wealth while she carried his bloodline in total isolation. Adiz looks up at him, her gaze completely steady, refusing to flinch against his terrifying, imposing presence. Her voice is low, smooth, and entirely devoid of the childish melodrama he handles daily in the syndicate. She tells him that if she had spoken to the child without absolute proof of the threat, the snake inside his house would have struck even sooner. She reveals that she has been quietly tracing the financial leaks within the Chonjiang Empire for weeks, mapping the digital footprints of his enemies. The poison wasn't ordered by an outside rival. It was bought and paid for by Chai-won, Seon Ryun's powerful, deeply vindictive ex-fiancée, who has been manipulating the syndicate elders to plant the rumors about Adiz's greed. But the knife cuts even deeper. Adiz locks her eyes onto his, her voice dropping a fraction as she delivers the final, devastating blow. She tells him that Chai-won didn't work alone. She found the digital receipts proving that Seon Ryun's closest lieutenant, Baek Tae-sung, a man who has stood by his side through 11 years of bloodshed, is drowning in millions of dollars of underworld gambling debts. Chai-won bought his debts, completely compromising his loyalty, and has been using him to systematically dismantle Seon Ryun's internal security from the inside out. Seon Ryun feels the world tilt on its axis. He turns away, his large fists slamming into the mahogany desk, fracturing the polished wood with a loud, echoing crack. He roars at her, asking if she truly expected him to sit idly by while his closest brother held a knife to his spine, letting him believe she was the one betraying him. Adiz stands up, stepping into his space, her small, soft hand pressing firmly against his rigid, tense forearm. Her touch is a sudden shock of warmth against his freezing skin. She tells him that if he had known, his pride and blind Mafia rage would have driven him to execute Tae-sung on the spot, signaling to Chai-won that her plot was exposed and forcing her to launch a full-scale, bloody coup before they were ready to defend against it. The power balance in the room shifts entirely. Seon Ryun handles the physical violence of the city, but Adiz holds the tactical blueprint to their survival. She tells him that he needs to stay visibly broken, angry, and distant because Chai-won spies are watching the estate, waiting to see if the poison tore them apart. Suddenly, a muted alert flashes on the security monitor behind the desk. Adiz looks at the screen, her face hardening into a mask of pure steel. She looks back at Seon Ryun, her voice chillingly calm as she tells him that Tae-sung's debt collectors have just bypassed the outer city checkpoints and are coming to collect his life tonight. If Tae-sung is killed or captured by them, Chai-won takes his hidden security files, exposing every blind spot in the Chonjiang Empire and destroying Seon Ryun permanently. She looks down at her hand, her thumb brushing against the heavy diamond wedding ring on her finger, and tells him that she has to leave the estate immediately. The rain drags in long, heavy sheets across the glass facade of an exclusive, subterranean luxury asset broker's office in the heart of the Gangnam district. Inside, the world is quiet, isolated from the storm, smelling of polished marble, expensive leather, and the heavy scent of old money. A single, focused spotlight cuts through the dim interior, illuminating a velvet-lined tray resting on a minimalist black marble desk. Adiz steps into the light, her long black waves dripping water onto the pristine floor, her face an unreadable mask of absolute determination. Her deep mahogany skin stands out brilliantly against the dark backdrop of the office as she opens her damp trench coat, revealing the crimson silk dress underneath. Across the street, buried in the deep shadows of an alleyway, Seon Ryun stands perfectly still. His dark eyes are fixed on the glass window, his chest heaving with a toxic mixture of suffocating grief and reignited paranoia. He had followed her vehicle through the blinding storm, his mind screaming at him that she was finally doing what everyone had always predicted, running away from his crumbling empire, stripping him of whatever she could carry on her way out. But nothing could have prepared him for the visceral horror of what he is witnessing right now. Through the glass, he watches Adiz lift her left hand. He watches her long, elegant fingers grip the heavy diamond wedding ring on her finger. With a slow, deliberate movement, she slips it off and places it gently onto the black velvet tray. That ring is not just a piece of compressed stone. It is the priceless heirloom diamond that his late mother had smuggled out of North Korea at the cost of her own blood, the very last physical connection Seon Ryun has to his shattered childhood. Watching Adiz push it toward a shady underworld broker feels like watching her slice a blade directly through his heart. The psychological distress ripping through his chest turns his muscles to iron. He wants to tear across the street, shatter the glass with his bare fists, and execute the broker where he sits. He wants to scream at her, to make her feel the agonizing weight of her betrayal. Every whisper from his syndicate elders flashes back into his mind, mocking his vulnerability, telling him that she was always a heartless parasite who only cared for his wealth. He forces himself to remain standing in the freezing rain, his knuckles turning white as he watches the broker slide a heavy, metallic briefcase filled with untraceable cash across the marble desk. Adiz doesn't hesitate. She grips the handle of the briefcase, her posture remaining fiercely regal, completely unaffected by the gravity of the sacred bond she just fractured. She turns away from the desk without a single glance back at the ring, stepping out of the office and walking directly into the driving rain. Seon Ryun moves deeper into the shadows, his face wet with a mixture of rain and cold sweat, his heart entirely deadened by the transaction. He watches her march down the narrow alleyway toward a black sedan idling in the darkness. The rear door swings open, and the interior light illuminates the man waiting inside to receive her. It is Baek Tae-sung. Seon Ryun's jaw tightens as he slips his hand toward the hidden holster beneath his soaked suit jacket, his mind completely made up. He is going to end this betrayal tonight. The interior of the abandoned warehouse on the edge of the Han River is cold, cavernous, and thick with the smell of damp earth and rusting iron. Flickering yellow construction lights hang from the high concrete ceiling, casting long, erratic shadows that dance across the massive pillars supporting the roof. The low roar of the river outside mixes with the steady thrum of rain against the corrugated metal walls. Adiz stands near the center of the space, her crimson dress a sharp splash of color against the gray concrete. Her eyes locked on Baek Tae-sung as he opens the heavy briefcase, his face pale under the yellow glare. Suddenly, the heavy metal doors of the warehouse are ripped open with a deafening crash. Seon Ryun storms into the room like an absolute demon born from the storm, his massive frame radiating a lethal, unhinged energy. His weapon is drawn, the black steel reflecting the dim light as he raises it, pointing it directly at Tae-sung's chest. His hand is trembling, not from fear, but from a volatile, explosive rage that threatens to swallow the entire room. He commands Tae-sung not to move a single muscle, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that vibrates through the concrete floor. He looks at Adiz, his eyes burning with an intense, bleeding heartbreak, telling her that he should have killed her the moment she set foot in Seoul. Before Seon Ryun can pull the trigger, Adiz moves. With a fierce, unyielding resilience that leaves no room for argument, she steps directly into his line of sight, placing her body entirely between the muzzle of his gun and the trembling lieutenant. She looks Seon Ryun dead in the eye, her voice cutting through his thunderous rage like a razor blade. She commands him to lower his weapon and open his eyes to the real chessboard. She reveals that she didn't keep a single dollar of the cash from the transaction. Every cent of the untraceable money from his mother's heirloom ring was handed directly to Taesung's primary underworld debt collectors 40 minutes ago, completely clearing his massive gambling debts in a single, devastating stroke. Seon Ryun freezes, his weapon still raised, but his mind suddenly reeling from the impact of her words. Adiz steps closer to him, her deep mahogany skin slick with rain as she places her small palm over the cold barrel of his gun, forcing it downward. She explains that by allowing Seon Ryun to follow her, and by letting Chaiwon's hidden spotters witness his genuine, unadulterated heartbreak across the street from the broker's office, they had created the perfect illusion. Chaiwon spies have already reported that Adiz is a greedy traitor who just destroyed her marriage, completely blinding the ex-fiancée to the fact that her leverage over Taesung is entirely gone. Adiz has effectively bought back the absolute loyalty of Seon Ryun's top lieutenant, turning him into a lethal double agent right under Chaiwon's nose. The realization strikes Seon Ryun like a physical blow to the chest, draining the righteous anger from his veins and leaving him filled with a wave of profound self-loathing. He looks down at his wife, completely awed by the clinical, high IQ genius of her sacrifice. She had willingly let him look at her with absolute disgust and hatred, ruining her own safety just to give him the tactical advantage he needed to survive. He understands now that she is the only true sovereign capable of ruling his dark world beside him. Taesung suddenly drops to his knees on the concrete, handing Seon Ryun an encrypted syndicate radio that has just begun to buzz with a heavy, distorted signal. Taesung looks up at his boss, his eyes filled with a desperate gratitude, whispering that Chaiwon just bit the bait. She thinks Seon Ryun is broken, isolated, and mourning a broken marriage, and she is already moving her primary illegal hit squad toward the main estate to eliminate Adiz and their unborn child tonight. The grand parlor of the estate is bathed in a tense, flickering twilight as the first wave of Chaiwon's mercenaries breaches the outer perimeter. Outside, the sharp, rhythmic pulses of flashbangs light up the foggy glass windows, and a muffled roar of automatic gunfire echoes through the courtyard as Madame Cho's loyal internal security forces hold the defensive line. The air inside the room smells heavily of gunpowder, ozone, and the expensive silk curtains draping the walls. Seon Ryun moves through the shadows with a cold, terrifying efficiency, pulling Adiz behind the heavy oak paneling of the main hallway into a secondary, deeply hidden wall compartment that only the Chonjiang head knows exists. Inside the narrow, concrete-reinforced space, the sounds of the battle outside fade into a dull, low thrum. Seon Ryun turns to face his wife, his breathing heavy but controlled, his hands no longer shaking with rage, but filled with a deep, reverent intensity. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a weathered, velvet box that has been sealed for over 20 years. When he flips the lid open, a raw-cut, brilliant diamond catches the dim amber light of the compartment, glimmering with a fierce, blinding purity that perfectly mirrors the stone Adiz had sold hours ago. Adiz looks down at the gem, her eyes widening in genuine surprise as her thumb traces her bare ring finger. Seon Ryun takes her hand, his large, calloused fingers sliding between hers with a protective warmth that wipes away the lingering chill of the storm. He drops to one knee before her, his dark eyes locked onto hers with an expression of absolute surrender and devotion. He reveals to her that his mother's original North Korean heirloom was never just one piece. Decades ago, before his family was forced to flee across the border, his mother's master jeweler had split the massive stone into two identical halves, creating a pair of twin fragments as an ultimate insurance policy against the fragility of their legacy. He tells her that she bankrupted her own safety and allowed him to hate her just to keep his chest beating. But he always had the second half hidden away for the queen who would truly deserve it. He slides the heavy gold band containing the second twin diamond onto her finger, sealing their bond not just as husband and wife, but as two absolute equals preparing to dismantle an entire underworld empire together. The psychological friction that had defined their marriage for months is entirely replaced by an unbreakable, terrifyingly lethal trust. Suddenly, a loud, heavy crash echoes from the courtyard outside as a vehicle rams into the main foyer doors. The estate's internal intercom system crackles to life, hissing with a sharp, static feedback before Chaiwon's voice blares through the speakers, her tone hysterical, venomous, and dripping with an unhinged arrogance. She speaks directly to Seon Ryun, bragging that she has already retrieved his mother's original ring from the Gangnam broker, and that she holds the raw antidote to the remaining slow-acting nightshade still lingering in Adi's blood. She gives him exactly 3 minutes to step out into the open courtyard and surrender the entire Chonjiang Empire to her family, or she will order her men to level the estate and burn everything he loves to the ground. The morning light begins to bleed through the heavy fog, casting a cold, gray pall over the estate's grand courtyard. Rusted iron gates hang off their hinges, shattered glass from the upper levels litters the wet stone like diamonds, and a heavy, oppressive silence settles over the scene, signaling an impending execution. Seon Ryun steps out from the ruined foyer completely alone, his massive frame a towering silhouette against the smoke drifting from the perimeter. He walks with a slow, chillingly calm deliberation into the center of the courtyard to face Chaiwon, who stands flanked by a dozen heavily armed mercenaries. Beside her, acting out his part as a broken traitor, Baek Taesung stands with his head bowed, tightly gripping the velvet box containing the original heirloom ring. Chaiwon breaks into a loud, hysterical laugh that echoes off the concrete walls of the fortress, her eyes gleaming with a malicious triumph. She lifts the original ring high into the air, mocking Seon Ryun, demanding that he sign over the absolute corporate and territorial rights of the Chonjiang Empire to her family's council elders immediately. She glares at the house, threatening to give her men the order to level the entire building with Adi's inside if he hesitates for even a single second. She operates entirely on the old, toxic rumors that his marriage was nothing but a transactional arrangement for wealth, fully expecting the ruthless Mafia boss to choose his hard-earned empire over the life of an outsider. But Seon Ryun looks her dead in the eye, his face completely devoid of fear, radiating a terrifying, quiet stillness that causes the mercenaries around her to tighten their grips on their weapons. His voice cuts through the freezing fog, low and absolute. He tells her that she can burn the city to ashes, dismantle his territory, and scatter his wealth to the wind, because the entire Chonjiang Empire means absolutely nothing to him compared to the safety and breath of his wife and unborn child. The raw, protective dominance in his posture leaves no room for doubt. He is entirely willing to watch his throne burn to the ground just to keep his family alive. Chaiwon's face contorts with sudden rage, realizing she holds no psychological leverage over a man who has completely detached himself from greed. But before she can give the command to open fire, a sharp electronic chime echoes from the balcony directly above them. Adi steps out into the morning air, her posture fierce and unyielding, her crimson dress catching the damp breeze. In her hand, she holds a sleek black remote detonator, her deep mahogany skin radiant against the cold sky, completely contradicting the image of a weak, dying victim. She looks down at the terrified ex-fiancé, her voice smooth, powerful, and entirely in control as she tells Chaiwon that her trap was broken hours ago. Adiz reveals that the original heirloom ring Chaiwon is holding isn't just a prize. The moment it was retrieved from the Gangnam broker, the micro-tracker hidden inside the setting synced Chaiwon's exact location, her illegal financial accounts, and the identities of her rogue hit squad to every single rival family and council elder in Seoul. Referencing the exact tactical breakdown of this trap, the camera focuses tightly on her hand. The high IQ queen has turned Chaewon's ultimate trophy into a tracking beacon, and the heavy rumble of approaching armored vehicles outside the gates confirms that the syndicate elders are already at the doorstep to clean their own house. The heavy iron perimeter gates are violently rammed open as a chaotic, three-way syndicate war erupts into the rain-slicked courtyard. Yellow floodlights from arriving council vehicles flicker wildly through the thick fog, blinding Chaewon's mercenaries as they realize they have been completely surrounded by the very elders they swore to bypass. Realizing her entire coup has shattered into pieces, Chaewon panics, her face twisting with an unhinged madness as she screams at Taesung to shoot Seon Ryun on the spot. But Taesung, completely liberated from his underworld debts thanks to Adi's midnight sacrifice, finally snaps his cover. He turns his weapon in a blindingly fast motion, shooting Chaewon's primary mercenaries before they can even raise their rifles, shielding Seon Ryun from the initial volley of bullets. The courtyard dissolves into a brutal, close-quarters firefight in the heavy smoke. Seon Ryun moves through the chaos like a demon unleashed from the underworld, his hyper-controlled stillness replaced by a terrifying, protective rage as he systematically dismantles every single threat in his path, driven by the absolute desire to avenge the attempt on his child's life. From a balcony above, Adiz provides flawless covering fire, her movements precise and entirely devoid of fear, working in perfect synchronization with her husband like a beautifully orchestrated machine of death. The physical dominance shifts entirely to the sovereign couple as they cut through Chaewon's rogue forces piece by piece, turning what was supposed to be an execution into a definitive slaughter of their enemies. Seon Ryun corners a bleeding, terrified Chaewon against the shattered iron gates, his black steel weapon raised directly to her forehead, his eyes dark with a lethal finality. But before he can pull the trigger and cement his hands in her blood, Adiz walks down the stone stairs, her hand placing a gentle, warm touch onto his tensed forearm. She looks at the ruined ex-fiancé, telling Seon Ryun not to waste a single bullet on a ghost, commanding him to let her face the judgment of the syndicate council she brought to their doorstep instead. Months later, the early morning sun breaks over the Seoul skyline, bathing the penthouse headquarters of the Chonjiang Empire in brilliant, warm amber and golden hues. The cold, dark shadows of the past months are completely washed away by the triumphant light reflecting off the pristine, floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The underworld has been entirely quieted. Chaewon has been permanently stripped of her family status, cast out into the lowest depths of the slums to live as a ruined, broken outcast for her rogue actions against the boss. Baek Taesung, having saved Seon Ryun's life in the courtyard, was granted a final, merciful judgment of permanent exile. He was sent to Vancouver with a massive financial inheritance to raise his family in peace, alive for one reason only, because Adiz asked for mercy and Seon Ryun listened to his queen. Seon Ryun stands by the massive glass window, looking out over the pristine city he now controls without a single internal threat left to challenge his rule. The rumors that defined their early marriage are entirely dead. No one in the multi-billion-dollar syndicate dares to whisper that his lady married him for wealth anymore. They know her now for what she truly is, the brilliant, high-IQ sovereign who saved their bloodline from the shadows. He turns as Adiz enters the room, wearing a stunning, tailored crimson gown that beautifully highlights her radiant mahogany skin and her clearly visible, healthy pregnant belly. Seon Ryun walks across the marble floor, his towering frame softening as he steps up behind her, wrapping his heavy, tattooed arms protectively around her waist. His large hands rest gently over her stomach, feeling the steady kick of their unborn child. As the morning light catches her left hand, the twin North Korean diamonds glimmer with a fierce, blinding purity on her finger, a matching set of absolute loyalty that can never be broken again. He leans down, resting his forehead against her dark waves, whispering his absolute surrender to the woman who didn't marry him for the architecture of his wealth, but chose to conquer his dark world entirely for his heart. She is no longer just his lady. She is the undisputed, absolute queen who rules the empire by his side. Seon Ryun thought his lady married him for wealth, until he realized she was willing to bankrupt her own safety to keep his heart beating. True strength doesn't love loudly. It loves completely, even when it costs everything. If this personal tale of betrayal, ultimate sacrifice, and absolute protective rage kept you glued to your screen tonight, take a moment to join our storytelling family by hitting that subscribe button and giving this video a like. Drop a comment below letting us know which city or country you're watching from right now. Our romance family spans the entire globe, and we love seeing where everyone gathers together. Don't let the drama end here. Click on the next video appearing on your screen right now to step directly into our next epic tale of loyalty and underworld power. We will see you there.